Welcome Part 9. Death Eaters caught in MINISTRY. No less than 20 active Death Eaters were arrested yesterday as the Department of Law Enforcement activated the first of what new Minister of Magic Rufus Scrimgeour say will be a series of protections for our government. All entrances into the ministry are now set up with a series of wards that alert the auras that the person passing through the ward is marked as a follower of you-know-who. Upon its first day of activation, the Auras took 23 people into custody, some of them high-leveled government workers. Their names were not revealed at press time. Scrimgeour claimed that he had unspeakables and curse breakers working at night to complete the project. The goal to weed out any spies that you-know-who might have within our government. The wards went active this morning at about 5 am, roughly an hour before people begin to arrive for work. Completely unaware of what awaited them. The Death Eaters are being questioned extensively and will be given the Dementor's kiss. As part of Scrimgeour's no-tolerance policy. You-know-who's followers are a brutal and merciless bunch. We will show them the same treatment until this war is over. Anyone caught bearing the mark will be given to the Dementors. No exceptions. When asked how he came to the idea of warding the entrances, Minister Scrimgeour simply said that a young friend gave him the suggestion. Harry was beaming as he reread the article. He remembered meeting Scrimgeour at the ministry and hoping the man was not the buffoon that Fudge had proven to be. Now here was the proof. Not only had he taken Harry's suggestions to heart, but he was also not going to back down. I just can't believe it. Susan beamed as she read the article with Harry at breakfast Friday morning. They were sitting at the Gryffindor table that morning along with the rest of their friends. I just can't believe it. Harry muttered, still in awe of the bravado the new minister was flaunting. It was now clear to Harry that Scrimgeour wanted to make headway in this war, and he had truly listened to what Harry had said. I wonder who they caught? Neville asked as Hannah, who'd been running late that morning, sat down next to him. Hannah looked preoccupied, and Susan had to smile to herself. They'd nearly made it through the week and Susan had not yet had her life threatened by anyone over her being with Harry. Susan was getting more and more confident that Hannah was going to be giving the rest of Hufflepuff House a very interesting show later that day. What's going on? The blonde asked. Susan took the paper from Harry and handed it to her best friend. It's a bit much, don't you think? Simply handing the Death Eaters to the Dementors without a trial. Hermione asked, looking to Susan. Would you rather all those murders go free? Neville asked. Most of those people's families are so rich, they can buy their way out of jail. Even though they might not be Death Eaters themselves, a lot of those people on the Wizengamot are rather corrupt. He's right. Susan nodded. I've heard Auntie say some of those people would sell their own flesh and blood if the price was right. But to condemn a person just for bearing the mark? Hermione looked appalled. Do you know anything about the dark mark? Susan asked. Hermione gave a sigh, and shook her head. I know that it's a variation on the protean charm and that only Voldemort can mark his followers with it. He can call them to his side no matter where he is by using it. Not bad, but a person has to take it willingly. Susan explained. Or it won't work. So, if someone has the mark, they've accepted it. They joined his forces of their own free will. And let's remember that there's a whole mess of people who are about to be out of school, who could be manipulated into taking the mark and flying his flag. Maybe if they know the consequences are this serious, they'll think about it a bit more before blindly following this. Psychopath. I suppose you're right. Hermione sighed again. He's replenishing his numbers, while ours are dwindling. Harry said. He kills without a care, and our side prefer to take prisoners. I'm not saying that being kissed by the Dementors is better than death, but at least this way, Voldemort's numbers might start declining a bit. And just maybe by offering up these idiots. We might keep the Dementors on our side. Ron pointed out. I hadn't thought of that. Hermione admitted. I don't like the thought of someone not getting a trial. What if someone took the mark, but hadn't done anything else yet? Would you feel good about possibly locking up someone who was innocent again? Like Sirius. Sirius didn't have the mark. Harry said quickly, his voice becoming sharp. Hermione held up her hands defensively. I know he didn't, but I'm saying. These people will have to be marked. Harry said, ending the discussion. It's war, and it's ugly. And the things we do may not be moral, or right, but it's about survival. Neville said wisely. I want to live, and I want all of you to live. So if that means I have to take someone else's life to protect you, I won't hesitate. Here, here. Zack said from Hermione's left. I wonder who gave the minister the suggestion. Hannah said. As she lowered the paper. Harry beamed a bit more, sitting up a bit straighter. Oh, you're kidding. The blonde Hufflepuff said with a roll of her eyes. My boyfriend is so smart. Susan grinned. But when did you ever talk to him? The first day I trained with Tonks in the ministry. We went for tea in the atrium and we ran into him. He tried to get me to, I don't know, support him or something. We got to talking, and I made a few suggestions. He told me that it was complicated, but it looks like he uncomplicated it. If he keeps getting these kind of results, I might actually be willing to do what I can to help him. Careful. Susan warned. You don't want to end up becoming his puppet. Can we talk about something else? Hermione asked, looking a bit pale. Harry knew she must still be very uncomfortable with Scrimgeour's no-tolerance approach. He knew that she understood the reasoning behind it all. Hermione had her reputation for brilliance for a reason. But her high morals were clearly at war with her reasoning. You still holding tryouts for the team tomorrow? Hannah asked Harry. I need to. I've got to put together a team and start practices. I heard the Slytherin teams already set their first practice for Sunday. Harry said, finishing his toast, and downing the last of his juice before getting to his feet. Everyone followed his lead, Hannah grabbing an apple and a piece of toast. They began heading towards the Transfiguration class as it was the only class they had for the day. When are we starting the day? Neville wondered. Next week. Harry said. I talked to McGonagall yesterday, and she wants to make sure everyone has a chance to sign up. It's going to be in the Great Hall. She said a lot of people have signed up already. She also gave me a few books to go over. They were fascinating. Hermione smiled to the rest of them. Clearly someone beat me to it. Harry remarked, and everyone laughed, including Hermione. With so many people, I'm going to need people helping me teach. I already asked Ron, Hermione, and Neville. Wish I could help, Harry. Hannah said around a mouthful of apple. But I'm there to learn all I can. It was made very obvious this past summer how much I need to improve. Same here. Susan admitted, her chest tightening as she remembered that night she nearly lost her aunt. Harry gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, and some of Susan's tension melted away. I understand. Harry smiled warmly, looking at his red-headed girlfriend. But I wanted to make the offer. Are we going to be using silent casting? Zack wondered. I think we should. Hermione suggested. And we shouldn't just make 6th and 7th years do it. You're right. Harry nodded. I asked McGonagall when we spoke why we learn incantations if we're just going to end up learning silent casting. She said it's easier to learn at first with incantations. It helps us to learn what the spells are supposed to feel like and get used to it over the years. She also said that it's easier as our magic develops. That makes sense. Hermione agreed. Our magic is tied to our bodies, and as we grow up, and go through puberty, our magic has to mature as well. I think it would have been easier to learn silent casting if we'd been doing it all along, Ron said as the group entered the classroom and took their seats. No one disagreed with him. Harry took his seat in the second row with Susan and Hermione on either side of him, and began thinking of how he was going to begin teaching this year. He knew there were going to be far more students this year than before when the club was secret. McGonagall had told him that nearly everyone in his year had signed up, as well as most of the 5th, 4th, and 3rd years, as well as quite a few 7th years. Harry had been concerned that no 1st or 2nd years had asked to join, but McGonagall explained they would not be ready physically for the lessons. That had been how they began discussing why students weren't taught silent casting from the start. Harry felt confident that more and more people were going to learn how to fight. And it made him smile to think that Voldemort would not be having an easy time this time around. Dumbledore had said the power he had that Voldemort knew not was love. Harry thought it was actually his ability to convince people to fight. Susan took Harry by the hand and led him to the 7th floor. It was only another minute until they were inside the room of requirement and the door was sealed behind them. The room was small and cozy, with a large sofa and a fireplace. "Why'd you bring me here?" Harry asked curiously. Susan could feel her face flushing as she fidgeted, looking at him with anxiety. Well, I need to explain before anything happens. See, Monday, Hannah and I made a bet. She began. Harry's eyes narrowed a bit as he turned to look at his girlfriend. "What kind of bet?" he asked slowly. Susan could see that Harry was getting suspicious, and he had begun very subconsciously backing up. Susan took his hand again and guided him to the sofa in front of the fire. They sat down and Susan heaved a nervous sigh. "Hannah told me that she thought that other girls would be really jealous of me since you and I were together. I didn't think that was true. I mean, outside of Ginny, I didn't think anyone else really fancied you to that extreme." "No offense," Susan quickly added. Harry simply shook his head. "I'm not offended," he assured her. So what happened? Susan could already tell that Harry was feeling protective of her. And she had to admit that it felt kind of nice. "Hannah was so sure that I would be threatened that she bet that if I didn't get at least one death threat by tonight, she would run Starkers through our common room. But if I did get a threat, I had to do something." "Ook," Harry said, unsure where they were going now. "Here's the thing. It's something I wanted to do on that last night before we came back to school. I was really close to doing it, but I was afraid my aunt would come out and catch us, and that would have been so humiliating. So I made us go to bed." Harry remembered when the two of them had lain on the sofa in the sitting room and had begun kissing each other. And how the parts of Susan that were not covered by her shorts or her bikini top felt against his own bare skin. Just the memory of that moment made his body react, and he had to fight to keep from blushing the way Susan was now. "So, wait. You're saying someone threatened you? Just after lunch? Some Gryffindor girl with black hair and like 30 friends with her?" "It wasn't anything big. The thing is, the parameters of the bet I made weren't met, and I never told Hannah about it. So, she's going to have to go through with her end of the wager. But, I've been feeling really guilty, so I decided that I would live up to my end, so that way neither of us loses." Harry felt his mouth go dry at Susan's words. "And what, what was your end of the bet?" Susan quickly took off her robe and removed her jumper before pausing. "There's two parts really," she said, her blush deepening. Then she began to unbutton her shirt. Harry watched mesmerized as his girlfriend began to undo her shirt. His brain seemed to be locked, and he was barely breathing now. It wasn't until his eyes caught sight of the lacy sea green material beneath her shirt that Harry reached out and took both of Susan's hands. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do," Harry said quickly, his hormones screaming at him for ruining everything. Susan stared at him, her eyes bright, a small embarrassed smile on her face. "Harry, I told you. I wanted to do this last week. I still do, but I'm nervous." "You'll be the first boy that. You'll be the first." Susan removed Harry's hands and slowly opened her shirt, slipping it off her shoulders. Harry had seen Susan in her bikini most of the summer, so he'd seen her less covered than she was now, but instinctively, he knew that he was about to see her much more of her. He wasn't wrong. Susan kept her eyes locked on Harry's as she first slipped the straps off her shoulders and then reached back to unclasp her bra. It hung on her, keeping her covered momentarily until she slipped it off. For a moment, Susan thought Harry might pass out as he didn't really appear to be breathing. He was staring hungrily at her, and Susan had to fight not to giggle. He looked so silly to her in that moment. Deciding to be a bit bolder, Susan took Harry's hand, and placed it on her left breast. The moment Harry's hand came in contact with Susan's bare flesh, he jumped as if he'd been shocked. Susan had to hold his hand to her to keep him from scurrying away. He'd gone from looking like a starving man looking at a buffet to a frightened bunny. "It's okay, Harry," she said in a soft, still quite nervous whisper. "It's okay. I want you to touch them. Just be gentle, okay?" Harry could only nod stupidly. Susan had to smile as she thought of how many times she'd heard older girls claim that girls had the power to ensnare boys without the use of wands. She now understood perfectly. She could have asked Harry to do anything in that moment, and he would have complied without hesitation. At the same time, Susan began to feel a warmth in her chest. She let go of Harry's hand, and he began to slowly move it around her breast, caressing it. But when his thumb ran over her nipple, Susan sucked in a sharp breath. Harry's hand shot away and he looked at her, filled with fear. "I'm sorry, I didn't meant to," he began. "No. It felt nice," Susan said, confused, but intrigued. "Try it again," she urged. Harry brought both hands up to her chest, this time, manipulating both of Susan's breasts. Again he slid his thumb across her now hardening nubs, and again Susan sucked in a breath. Her eyes falling close as sharp jolts of pleasure coursed through her young body. "That's really interesting," she sighed. Harry was now circling both his thumbs against her nipples. And Susan was arching her back towards him. Suddenly, Susan grabbed Harry by the back of his head, and drew him to her for a very deep kiss. She pushed him back onto the couch and slid on top of him, never breaking the kiss. It was an hour later when they finally broke apart to take a bit of a break, each of them flushed and flustered. "Okay. We are definitely going to be doing much more of that," Susan said as she gasped for breath. "No arguments here," Harry said, though he was rubbing at his scar, which had begun to tingle. He also noted that he felt a bit dizzy. He'd never felt dizziness in association with his scar. Usually it was severe pain and often vomiting. Harry rubbed at it instinctively, but the tingling did not abate. "Are you all right?" Susan asked. "I've been noticing that you've been rubbing at your scar a lot more lately." "It's probably nothing." Harry waved it off. "Please don't do that," Susan said irritably. "Don't pretend like everything is okay, when a moron can see that it's not." "Susan, it's fine." "Really?" Harry tried again, but Susan backed away from him, and covered her bare chest with her arms. Feeling hurt and very self-conscious, I think I showed a lot of trust in you just now. Susan began. I don't know why you can't have the same trust in me. Harry sighed heavily. I do trust you, Susan. It's just. We were having a good time, and I don't want to ruin it. Susan bent down and retrieved her bra, and began redressing. You did ruin it, Harry. Oh, come on, why do you have to push all the time? Harry asked, now exasperated. Because it's my nature. Susan fired back. Excuse me for wanting to be involved with my future husband's life. For wanting to help him, no matter how trivial the problem might seem. Fine. Fine. Harry said agitatedly, getting to his feet. He strode angrily to the fireplace before spinning on his heel and glaring at Susan. You want to help? You want to know about this? He pointed to his scar, which looked almost as if it were pulsing in the firelight. Just remember that you asked for it? Harry snapped. He then began shouting about how he was able to feel just what Lord Voldemort was feeling and how it affected him. He told her about the nausea he always had whenever he was sucked into the Dark Lord's mind. He saw what the Dark Lord saw. Tortures and killings. Harry concluded. The happier, or angrier he is, the worse this feels. Harry said, pointing again to his scar. His tone had calmed considerably over his nearly 10-minute rant, while Susan sat there paralyzed by the horror she felt learning of Harry's burden. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Harry's shoulders slumped as all of his irritation left him. I wasn't trying to make you angry, or say that you can't help me. And I do trust you, but you can't push me. I know. Susan nodded. I'm sorry. I guess that sometimes I forget that we've only just started dating. There's times when it feels like we've been together for years. When we have moments like. Susan nodded towards the place she and Harry had been snogging only moments before. It's times like that I forget about how things really are between us. It makes me want more between us, and I don't mean just physically. I know. I sometimes feel like that too. It's hard for me to, because I have the whole Voldemort thing on me. Harry said, taking his seat next to Susan again. I'm being torn in two directions here. My heart wants to focus on you, but my head keeps telling me that defeating him should be my priority. Well, I think you've been doing a good job of balancing. Susan gave a soft smile. Thanks. Harry smirked. Susan stared at him for a few minutes before maneuvering herself into his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. I meant what I said, Harry. I want to help in whatever way I can, no matter what the problem is. No matter what it is, you can tell me. I'm here to support you. You can trust me. Susan whispered, keeping her eyes locked on his. I do. I promise that I will try harder to let you in. There's still a lot that you don't know, and I'm still trying to sort out myself. Be patient with me. I'm not really used to people caring. I can do that. Susan sighed as she rested her head on his shoulder. Oh, I almost forgot. She said, suddenly getting to her feel. There's one more part of the bet I need to do. Or actually, you need to do for me. Susan looked far more nervous than she had before she had taken off her shirt. Stay there, and no matter what, don't turn around, or I swear I will hex your bits right off. Okay. Harry said nervously. You two are a little weird sometimes. Harry said. Looking at his girlfriend with an odd expression. Susan ran around to behind the sofa they had shared, and Harry heard her clothes rustling, and then she came back and sat on his lap again. She was still dressed, and her shirt was buttoned all the way up again, and she had something in her closed fist. Put these in your pocket, and tomorrow at breakfast, let Hannah see them. Hannah, and no one else. I mean it, Harry, I will die if anyone else sees them. Promise me. She pleaded. All right. Hannah and no one else, but what is it? Harry asked curiously. Susan placed the item in his hand and after a moment's hesitation, let it go for him to examine. I'm putting a lot of trust in you here, Harry. Please don't make me regret this. She sighed, looking apprehensive. She pulled his right hand from around her and placed something in it. If you show these to anyone, I will hurt you very badly. I will give you very painful boils on your bits, and your bum, so you can't sit down. I promise. What is it? Susan took her hand away, and Harry saw a wadded bit of cloth in his hand. What he held took Harry's breath away. And he swallowed heavily. The cloth was silky feeling and sea green in color, just as her bra had been. Harry looked at Susan confusedly and she was smiling back at him, though her cheeks were burning red. Put them in your pocket, and tomorrow at breakfast. Show them to Hannah. But you just told me not to show them to anyone. Harry pointed out. Except Hannah. She wanted you to have my bra, but then I guess she realized that my bra is kind of huge, and it might be awkward to keep in your pocket. Yeah, a bit. Harry agreed. Susan smiled and playfully slapped his shoulder. Anyway, when you let her see that you have these, she'll know I kept up my end of the bet. We should be heading back. Susan said, trying to take attention away from the fact that she'd just given her knickers to her boyfriend. Wait. What? Why? We still have hours before our curfew. Harry said, stuffing Susan's undergarment in his pocket. We can stay here for a while. Susan grinned at Harry and kissed him sweetly. Despite everything, Harry was a teenaged boy. And don't think I don't want to, but... well, Hannah's going to be streaking the common room. And I'd really like to watch her make an idiot of herself. So you like watch Hannah naked then? Harry said with a lecherous smile. Susan shoved him hard back into the sofa. You are such a boy. She laughed. Hannah was waiting on her bed in the fifth-year Hufflepuff dormitory when Susan rushed in. Looking excited and a bit flushed. Hannah had no doubt that she'd just been with Harry, and they had likely been snogging in some broom cupboard. There you are. I was beginning to think you were going to miss my show. She smiled. You don't have to do this, you know. Susan said. Nope. I made a bet, and I lost. I'm still shocked no one threatened you though. Hannah sighed, getting to her feet and kicking off her shoes. I can't believe I'm going to do this. I should really think before I speak, you know. Hannah slipped off her robes, and began shedding the rest of her clothing before walking nude into the bathroom. The common room is through that door. Susan said, pointing the dormitory door. I am well aware of where the common room is, thank you. But I figure if they're going to get a look, I want to make it memorable. Where is your razor? Susan walked in and handed Hannah her razor and watched as Hannah ran her hands over her legs and other areas before applying some lotion and running the razor over her skin to make herself smoother. Whoa, you're shaving there? Susan asked in shock as Hannah went about her beautifying regime. My sister told me that guys really like it when it's smooth. She wasn't wrong about the underwear, so I figure why the hell not? Hannah smiled. Neville really liked it? Oh, will you stop it? I don't need those pictures in my head. Susan wrinkled her nose. Just hurry up. Why are you in such a rush? I'm the one who's going to be walking down the au natural. You should be reveling in my misfortune. I'm thinking you're actually enjoying this. Susan quirked her eyebrow. A bit. Hannah smirked. I don't know why, but ever since one made the bet, I've been kind of hoping you wouldn't get threatened so I could do it. It's thrilling in a weird way. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm freaking out a bit, but I don't know. Maybe I'm a deviant, and I'm only beginning to figure it out. Hand me a towel. Susan complied and Hannah cleaned herself off and double-checked to make sure she was all finished. Satisfied that she'd done a good job, she then checked her makeup, and reapplied her lip gloss. Okay, showtime. She grinned. And Susan finally saw her friend beginning to blush. Susan followed her best friend out of the dorm, where they nearly collided with a third-year girl, who went beet red at seeing the naked older girl. Hannah went down into the common room to find it quite full, though most of the first, second and third years were now in bed. Hannah actually felt relief at that. She didn't want to scar the babies. Almost at once, there was whistling and cheering as she emerged from the stairs. Hannah decided that she would play it up, instead of being embarrassed. She had decided earlier in the week that this was the best course of action. If she ran through and tried to hide the fact she was without clothing, no one would ever let her live it down. However, if she walked around calmly, and acted as if nothing was wrong, it would just be thought of as an interesting beginning to another sexually charged year at Hogwarts. So, she strolled around the common room thrusting her ample chest out, blowing kisses and wiggling her bum enticingly. Girls were laughing and cheering her on while boys were drooling and whistling. Hannah Simple strutted about the common room before taking Susan by the arm, and with a rather suggestive comment about what they were about to do, went back to their dorm. Susan had real difficulty in going to sleep that night. Between fits of laughter at her best friend's antics and remembering what she and Harry had gotten up to, Susan's mind and hormones had a real tough time settling down. The next morning Hannah and Susan took seats at the Gryffindor table where Harry, Ron, Hermione and Lavender were sitting together enjoying their morning meal. Susan greeted Harry with a kiss on the cheek, before taking a seat on his left. Hannah squeezed in between Neville and Harry and began filling her plate. As she was about to take a bite of her toast, she felt Harry nudge her shoulder. She looked at him, and was just about to ask what he wanted, when she saw his eyes looking between the two of them. Following his line of sight, she saw that his hand was in his pocket. She watched with growing curiosity as his hand slipped out and she saw that he had a bit of sea green fabric between his fingers. He then shoved it back into his pocket, and she looked up at him to find him smiling at her coyly. It took a minute for Hannah to puzzle together what had just happened, and what she had just seen. She knew that lacy green fabric, but for some reason, it wasn't coming to the front of her mind right away. And then she remembered Susan making a point of putting on her green knickers the day before. The same shade of green Harry had just shown her. And if Harry had Susan's knickers, that meant that Susan had given them to Harry. Which meant, "You bitch." Hannah snapped, looking at Susan, who looked shocked until she saw Harry grinning, and realized he must have just revealed that she had made good on her bet. Susan simply looked at her friend with the same grin Harry had the previous night when she'd taken off her shirt. Nearly 2 months into the new school year, and Dumbledore found himself hip-deep in paperwork, when all he truly wanted was to find and destroy all of Lord Voldemort's Horcruxes once and for all. It had been almost 4 months since he had found the ring and the locket, which were now secured in a safe hidden within his office, along with the remains of the diary of Tom Marvolo Riddle. But he was still no closer to finding the others. Dumbledore was beginning to think it might be a good idea to destroy those in his possession. At least then some progress would have been made. Dumbledore sighed wearily as he began thinking about Horcruxes. The subject weighed heavily on his mind because there was one Horcrux he knew that he could not destroy. To destroy it would be to kill an innocent, and Harry deserved a chance at a full life. But he had a theory regarding Harry's Horcrux. A theory that involved the power prop he's eyes to destroy Lord Voldemort. love. He still held out hope that Harry and his betrothed, Susan Bones, could find true love, and it would kill the Horcrux. That hope was kept alive when Harry had admitted feeling strange sensations in his scar, that normally caused him nothing but pain. Dumbledore hoped that as Harry's feelings for Susan grew stronger, the Horcrux would get weaker. The most important thing was to keep the fact that Harry was a Horcrux a secret. If Voldemort found out the truth. Dumbledore was thankfully shaken from these disturbing thoughts by a knock on his door. Checking the time, Dumbledore realized it must be Professor Snape. The new defense teacher had requested a meeting with the headmaster. He had seemed rather insistent about it. "Enter," Dumbledore said, and Snape came inside. But instead of sitting down, the defense teacher went to the cabinet where Dumbledore kept his pensieve. "May I ask what has you so aggravated this evening?" Dumbledore asked as he watched Snape retrieve the pensieve and bring it to the headmaster's desk. "It will be much easier if I just show you," Snape said as he drew silvery memories from his temple and placed them into the pensieve. When he finished, and motioned for Dumbledore to enter, and followed the headmaster, placing his face into the stone basin. The memories swirled and formed around them until the two men were standing on one side of the defense against the dark arts classroom. "What is it that I should be looking for?" Dumbledore asked, sounding irritated. Snape just shook his head. "Just watch," Snape said. The two men stood on the side of the memory defense against the dark arts classroom as the sixth-year Gryffindors and Slytherins lined up facing against each other in preparation to practice advanced shield charms. As they students held their wands at the ready, the memory Snape was pacing around them explaining what they were to be doing, making sure they understood how displeased he would be if they deviated from his lesson. Memory Snape set the students to task and continued his slow methodical pacing. Real Snape led Dumbledore to where Draco Malfoy was standing, facing against Lavender Brown, who looked quite put out at having to be paired with him. Dumbledore glanced up the line to see Harry Potter paired with Daphne Greengrass. The young blonde woman was smirking at Harry, but Dumbledore noted that it wasn't a malicious smirk at all. In fact, it almost seemed friendly. Then the smirk became something mischievous as the Slytherin girl fired the first of a volley of hexes that Harry managed to avoid with his shield charm. The advanced shield got stronger with each casting, and Dumbledore beamed at Memory Harry. "Mr. Zabanai is one of my best students in silent casting," Snape offered, motioning towards the dark-skinned boy who was keeping Seamus Finnegan at bay, so to speak. "Other than Miss Granger." Dumbledore smiled as Hermione sent a jelly legs hex at Tracy Davis, who fell to the floor when her legs went wobbly. "Pay attention," Snape said, redirecting the headmaster's focus back to Draco and Lavender. They were instructed to use nothing stronger than a stinging hex. The Gryffindors were using mostly mundane hexes. Snape explained as the two men watched Lavender try to damage Draco's shield, which Dumbledore could see was quite well done. Draco was taking the measure of the Gryffindor girl before took his turn. The first curse was cast and hit Lavender in the belly. Lavender stood still for a second before suddenly doubling over and shrieking in pain, though she appeared to the untrained eye to be physically all right. And then Dumbledore noticed the girl was holding her hands between her legs in her nether area. Where did he learn such a curse? Dumbledore turned in shock. The memory swirled around them and the two men were back in the headmaster's office once again. Dumbledore sat heavily in his chair, feeling as if the wind had been knocked out of him. She was sent to the hospital wing, and Madame Pomfrey was able to reverse the effects. The curse wasn't strong enough to cause permanent damage. It's clear now that the boy has received special tutelage from his aunt. I warned you. I warned you that the boy was going to be dangerous. Yes, you did warn me, but I stick by my original statement. He has yet to do anything to condemn him. We need to reach out to him. Are you completely out of your mind? Snape roared. You just saw with your very own eyes that he tried to sterilize that girl. If he is able to perfect that spell, or any others his dear Aunt Bellatrix has taught him. I am well aware of what could happen. Dumbledore said, his voice beginning to raise in frustration. I am also aware that he is at a crucial crossroads, and that it is our responsibility to help him make the right choice. If we fail Mr. Malfoy, we fail ourselves. Tell me, have you made any progress in reaching out to him? I've told you he has become evasive, and short-tempered. He has also become quite the capable Occlumens. I am telling you, Draco does not wish to be saved. His mind is made up, and he is going to continue on the road of his choosing. His father has done irreversible damage, and Draco wishes to serve the Dark Lord. Dumbledore sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Severus, the boy has yet to take a life. Nor has he made any attempt to do so. He most certainly has not tried to kill me as he has been ordered to. He is still within reach, however slim the chance may appear to be. He has not given himself over to Voldemort yet. Why do I even bother? You wish to ignore what is right in front of you, be it on your own head. What about Potter? You told me I would be seeing some very noticeable increases in the boy's power. He's just as pathetic as he has been these past 5 years. I will admit that his shield was strong, but not as strong as it should be according to what you've told me. Snape asked, turning the topic. I am curious about that myself. Dumbledore admitted. Perhaps things between Harry and Miss Bones are not going as well as I believed. What does the whelp's relationship have to do with his magical output? Snape scoffed. It is not important as of this moment. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will think on it, and notify you of what we will do. In the meantime, please keep monitoring Mr. Malfoy's progress. Snape looked disgusted at being dismissed like that, but he was also very angry for the headmaster's complete ambivalence toward how dangerous the younger Malfoy was becoming. Snape didn't care much for any student's well-being, but he did not wish to see any of his charges actually injured or killed. Not even Harry Potter, and he could not tolerate that boy in the least. Snape slammed the door behind him, leaving the headmaster alone with a heavy heart. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix trilled a sad note, and Dumbledore sighed. He knew of Draco's mission, but had hitherto had no reason to actually fear his ability to carry it out. But after the display he just witnessed, he now felt differently. And worse, Harry had not yet begun to show signs of improvement. Dumbledore knew that his theory was right, in that Harry needed to love, and be loved in return to rid himself of the Horcrux within him. Dumbledore also knew that when the Horcrux died, Harry would then have full access to his magical core, without the abomination feeding off of it like a parasite. Dumbledore wondered for the 15th time if he should not give Harry and Miss Bones private quarters to perhaps speed things along. Their world was in serious danger, and everything relied on Harry being able to defeat the Dark Lord. And the ability to do that lay in the hope that Harry could feel real love from someone, and return that love. Dumbledore rose from his chair and went to the window to stare out on the grounds. The leaves were turning color as October wore on. From his vantage point he could see students making the most of the good weather while it lasted. The headmaster looked towards the black lake and sighed. He knew that his time in this world was nearly done, and he felt he had so much left to do. He had found 3 Horcruxes, but 3 still remained unknown to him. Well, 2 were unknown, 1 was just unreachable. But it would be dealt with, even if it took his very last breath. A dark thought entered his mind, and Dumbledore shuddered. What if he failed? He'd made so many mistakes in regards to Voldemort, and young Harry. Would Harry be able to finish what Dumbledore had started? Dumbledore felt his heart begin to break as he imagined having to explain to Harry everything that needed to be done before Voldemort could be defeated. The poor boy already had so much weighing upon him, this would be cruel to place on him as well. Dumbledore was once again filled to bursting with motivation to see this task finished before his time in this world ended. He only hoped that he was right about Draco Malfoy. "Hey Susan," Zack said as he sat next to Susan in the Hufflepuff common room. Susan looked up, rather surprised. She hardly ever saw Zack, unless Hermione was with him. He was almost never in the common room anymore. "Hey Zack, what's going on?" she said, looking at her former crush. Zack shrugged, and looked interestedly at the book in her hands. "A Witch's Heart?" he asked. "I know it's cheesy, but I really like it," Susan groaned. "One wouldn't think you'd need to be reading something so trashy when you're in your own whirlwind romance with Harry," Zack said. There was something in his tone that struck Susan as strange. She didn't know exactly what it was, and she felt intrigued by it. "I guess," Susan said. "We haven't seen that much of each other this past month. I mean outside of classes and whatnot. With homework and Quidditch and the da and everything, he's been pretty busy. But things are still good between you both, right?" Zack asked. Susan made a face at Zack as she was caught off guard by his question. In truth, Susan was feeling increasingly upset that she and Harry had not been alone together in a month. Other than quick kisses exchanged in passing, they hadn't been physical at all. They got to talk a lot during meals, which was always nice, but Harry was stretched pretty thin right now. Susan knew it wouldn't last, and she also knew that she would have his undivided attention the rest of her life. She simply had to persevere through this trial. Still, she really wanted a bit of time alone with her boyfriend. She was 16 and her hormones were screaming for attention, and Susan wasn't sure how much more she could stand listening to Hannah about how far she and Neville were progressing. She expected any day now to hear that Hannah and Neville had finally shagged. If that happened, Susan wondered if she would hug her best friend, or kill her for bragging. "Things are all right," Susan shrugged, finally getting around to answering his question. "I just wondered. I hardly ever see you two together," Zack said, avoiding Susan's eyes. "Why are you asking me all of this?" Susan asked. She had enough of trying to figure out why Zack was suddenly so curious about her relationship when he hadn't really seemed to care before now. "Because I'm your friend, and I'm concerned," Zack said defensively. Susan stared at him for a few moments, but he didn't comment further. "How are things with you and Hermione?" Susan countered. Zack shrugged. "Okay. Just okay? You guys always look so happy together," Susan probed. "We are," Zack said, but once again, Susan noted how his tone didn't seem to match what he was saying. He also seemed incapable of looking at her, which was unusual for him. Susan noted that he also seemed rather fidgety. But, she's so busy studying, sometimes I think she forgets about me. Zach sighed. I really am attracted to her intelligence, I just didn't realize how consumed she is by her thirst for knowledge. I can understand. I knew that Harry had a lot going on when he and I agreed to start seeing each other, but I just didn't realize that I would take a backseat sometimes to his other obligations. I know he tries, but sometimes. Yeah. Zach smiled. They fell into a comfortable silence, and Susan thought how strange it was that a year ago, she would have given anything for Zach to be sitting as close to her as he was. Wait a minute, Susan thought. When did he get so close to me? Susan turned to Zach, who was now looking at her strangely. She felt an odd twisting in her stomach, and before she could even begin to wonder where it had come from, Zach was drawing nearer to her, his eyes locked onto her lips. Whoa! Susan said quickly, putting up a hand to Zach's chest before his lips reached their target. What's wrong with you? I have a boyfriend, and you have a girlfriend. You can't just go around snogging people when you're with someone else. She wanted to scream, but she was thankful that she had kept her voice down. She didn't want everyone in the common room to turn and watch the unfolding drama. She could already feel her cheeks heating with embarrassment. I thought you liked me. Zach asked, confused. I do. You're my friend, but... No, I thought you really liked me. I thought you had a crush on me. I mean, all last year you were trying to. Zach said, looking pleadingly at her. Okay, I don't know what's going on with you right now, Susan said, getting to her feet and clutching her book to her chest almost as if it were a shield. But whether I liked you in that way or not, I have a boyfriend right now, and I'm not going to dump him just because you finally got your head out of your arse. Or got it stuffed up there even further. Susan all but ran up the stairs to her dorm, where she fell onto her bed more confused than she had ever been in her life. A year ago she would have been in seventh heaven had Zach attempted anything close to what had just happened, and she never would have even considered stopping him. But she was with Harry now, and she had feelings for Harry. Strong feelings. Not to mention the marriage contract that meant she would be spending her life with Harry, which she no longer felt was a curse. More of an issue. Still, Susan could not deny that she still felt things for Zach. Her feelings had never vanished, they had simply been repressed. But everything was complicated. She had become friends with Hermione, and she didn't want to cause problems for her. Not to mention all the trouble it would create between herself and Harry. And Susan and Harry already had a lot to deal with without Zach's clear case of idiocy. Susan grabbed her pillow and screamed violently into it, cursing Zachariah Smith for his stupidity. Hey, I've been looking for you, Hannah said with that same bright grin that had been on her face since Susan's 16th birthday party. Are you all right? Hannah asked when she got a good look at Susan's face. Susan immediately launched into a detailed explanation as to what had just taken place. Hannah listened to everything, her face contorting from confusion to irritation to bewilderment. That's really odd, Hannah said. I thought he and Hermione were happy. So did I, Susan agreed. And now I'm all confused. Because you still like him? Hannah asked. Yeah, but it's not nearly as strong as it was last year, you know. Susan asked pleadingly. Hannah smiled. Of course not. Susan looked confused and Hannah rolled her eyes. Well, it's obvious. Okay, so you and Harry didn't have an ideal start, but you've come a long way in a short amount of time. You finally seem to have this understanding between you two, and because of that, you've both been able to allow yourselves to feel things for each other. Now, I'm not saying you're in love, but there's a definite spark there. Megan said she wished she could get a guy to look at her the way Harry looks at you. Hannah said smugly. And just how does he look at me? Susan asked. She hadn't noticed Harry giving her any particular looks lately. Like you're some mythical being that he's discovered to be real, and he can't believe it. I'm surprised you haven't seen it. He looks at you like that all the time. And you cannot sit there and tell me that you don't have strong feelings for him. You guys talk all the time, and he really listens to everything you say. Not just to humor you, but because he's really interested. Not to mention that funny look you get after a long night of snogging him. And let's not forget you showed him your boobs, and I don't think you'd do that for just any guy, . That was a bet. Susan protested, but Hannah waved it away. A bet that you did not have to own up to. Hannah pointed out. You chose to use it as an excuse. You wanted to get closer to him physically, and there's nothing wrong with it. I know you two haven't been able to spend any real time together over the last month, but I've still seen how you light up when he sits next to you at breakfast. Or that goofy smile on your face when you guys say goodbye, and he kisses you and strokes your cheek like it's the softest thing he's ever felt in his life. Do you have any idea how many girls want to kill you because of that alone? Hannah smirked. Susan's hand went to her cheek as she thought about how Harry always said goodbye to her. He always took hold of her left cheek as he kissed her. Then he would gaze into her eyes for just a second, and caress her cheek so gently. It always left her with butterflies in her stomach. She dreamed about those moments that she got to experience every day. It was so strange, but so amazing. So what am I supposed to do about Zach? Susan asked exasperatedly. I wish I had an answer. This is like really not a good thing because, if we say something to Hermione. Hannah shrugged. It'll break her heart. Susan sighed. But if we don't? I mean, I'm not saying that he'll do it with someone else, but it'll be worse if that happens and she finds out that way. I don't really know, Suz, I kind of think we should just stay out of it. Susan sighed heavily again and flung herself back onto her bed. No one ever told me that relationships would be this difficult. Mine is easy. Hannah laughed as she went to her trunk to get her pajamas. I know. Susan grunted. You remind me at every opportunity. Harry shut his locker and sat down on the bench. He was exhausted. It had been a pretty brutal practice, and Harry and his Quidditch team had worked really hard that night. All Harry wanted to do was go right up to Gryffindor Tower and crawl into bed and sleep. Unfortunately, he still had 3 essays to complete, and he had to plan this week's lesson for the day. Are you coming? Harry sat up slowly, not even remembering lying down to find Ron in the doorway looking just as tired as Harry felt. Yeah. Harry sighed. He heaved himself up and began to head back to the castle with his best friend. Harry, look, I got to say something here. Ron began, and Harry turned to look at his red-headed friend who looked pretty determined at the moment. I think you're taking on too much, and if you don't ease up, you're going to crack. I appreciate the concern, but... Harry began, but Ron cut him off quickly. Harry, I know what you're going to say. You're going to try and convince me that everything is under control and that you've got a lot of responsibility and Voldemort and blah, blah, blah. Mate, there's only one other person who knows all of that better than me, and I'd bet every galleon I am destined to make. She's in the library right now studying for Newt exams. The thing is, both Hermione and I miss you, and we want to spend time with our friend. I also happen to think that Susan would really like a bit more attention from you. Did she say something to you? Harry asked, his brow furrowing. No. But you can just tell if you know what to look for. Ron shrugged. Harry's face took on a skeptical look and Ron broke under scrutiny. All right, fine. Lavender pointed it out to me. The point is that you're spreading yourself way too thin and it's going to kill you before Voldemort has a chance. That's twice you've said his name now. Are you okay? Do you want to lie down? Harry asked, trying to keep his face from breaking into a grin. Stuff it. Ron glared. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Yeah, I think so. What did Lavender say about me and Susan? Harry asked curiously. Well, she thinks that you guys are going to break up soon if you don't start spending more time with her. She says that Susan looks sad a lot now. Lav also thinks Susan won't say anything because she doesn't want to get in a fight with you over it. I guess I have kind of neglected her a bit. It's just. You don't have to explain, Harry. Like I said, I know what's going on. And just because Hermione and I aren't getting special training like you are, doesn't mean we're slouching. Hermione's got loads of lesson plans for the day that she wants to run by you, and she's found a lot of spells that she and I have been trying out. Lavender's been helping a bit because she knows that you're going to have to fight Voldemort. She doesn't know about the prophecy, but she's not stupid. Anyone with half a brain can tell that great bastard's got it in for you. The two boys had reached the entrance hall and began making their way up the stairs to their house. Harry was contemplating everything he'd been told, while Ron remained silent. Harry didn't know when it happened, but he liked the change in Ron. As they walked, Harry thought about all the little changes he'd noticed in Ron since they'd got back to school. The first and most shocking was Ron's work ethic had become more diligent. Harry thought he'd heard Neville remark that since Lavender liked to get all her homework done before she had fun, that perhaps Ron had taken on the same philosophy. Harry wondered how Hermione felt since she had hounded both boys about their homework for 5 years and they'd all but ignored her attempts to help better them. Then there was the fact that Ron didn't look like a starving pig at meals. Well, not as much. He still ate like it was his last meal, but he now managed to keep his mouth closed while chewing, and waited until he swallowed his food before speaking. And all this profound insight Ron had been sharing. Not to mention the hugeness of Ron being able to say Voldemort's name. It was official. Ron Weasley had hit the jackpot when he started Lavender Brown. Can I ask you something? Harry asked, looking to Ron, who shrugged. What's changed that you can say Voldemort's name without dying of heart failure? A few nights ago, while you were training with Mad Eye, a bunch of us got to talking about things. Anyway, Hermione pointed out that the name is completely stupid. She wrote it out for us, and showed everyone that it was an allegory or whatever she called it. Anagram. Whatever. The point is that she and a few others all kind of made fun of it and really made it seems exactly like a boggart. The best weapon to use against it was laughter, really. We had a really good time making up new names for him. Seamus wanted to write them down and have him choose something more terrifying. Moldy Warts was really popular, but I really liked Ginny calling him Lord High Baron of all impotency Limpy Shorts. What? Harry asked, grabbing the banister to prevent himself from falling over with laughter. My sister. Ron said proudly. Limpy Shorts? Harry asked again, wiping at his eyes. Even Hermione laughed at that one. I thought for sure she was going to pee herself. And you know how uptight she can be. She had a few choice ones herself. Speaking of Hermione, have you noticed? Actually, you probably haven't. Lavender thinks there might trouble on the horizon for her and Zach. I just want to give you a heads up. What do you mean? Harry asked, worry over Hermione wiping out his earlier mirth. Same reason she's worried for you and Susan. Though, Lav doesn't think Hermione and Zach are right for each other in the first place. Can we just back up here? What's going on with Hermione and Zach? Harry asked. Apparently nothing, according to Lav. She says because Hermione's all about studying, it's affecting her relationship. She's convinced Zach is going to start cheating on her any day now. I've been kind of watching him, but he's always with Hermione, so I don't know if she's seeing something that's not there, or nothing's happened yet or what. Well, Lavender's a lot smarter about dating than either of us. But I think we need to trust that Hermione knows what's going on. We need to respect her and not stick our noses in until she asks us to. Harry said irritably. Hearing that Zach might break Hermione's heart made him want to go right to the Hufflepuff common room and beat Zach to within an inch of his life. Lavender said the same thing. Ron smiled. Like you said, smarter than us. Doesn't mean I like it. Harry sighed. Welcome to my world. Ron snickered. He's an alright guy, but now it's so hard to hang out with him because I just want to grab him and just tell him to not mess around with Hermione. Oh, he knows. Harry smiled. Ron saw the humorous malevolence in his best friend's eyes and began laughing. I guess I should have figured you had words with him over the summer. Harry began laughing along with Ron. Ron stopped Harry as they finally reached the portrait of the fat lady. Seriously, Harry. Think about what I said. I know you and Susan are going to be together regardless, but if you don't spend time with her, she's going to end up resenting you. You'll be stuck with her, and she'll hate you. I wouldn't even wish that life on Malfoy. Well, maybe Malfoy. All right. I get your point. I will try and ease up on things so I can spend more time with my girlfriend. Ron nodded with a smile and turned and gave the password. Ron. Harry said, causing his friend to turn around. Thanks. That's why I'm here. Ron smiled, and the two began to chuckle again. Please like and subscribe.